to this episode of Ed Talks, the podcast where we explore the latest trends and innovations in the world of learning and development. I'm your host, Inna Horvath, and today we are diving into the learner-first design and virtual training with our special guest, Jose Casal, a leading business agility consultant and founding partner of Actineo Consulting LLP. I think I've asked how to pronounce it correctly and I messed it up, so you will need to correct me later on in the episode. But special greetings to Jose with his extensive expertise in flow thinking, Kanban, and Scrum. Jose is dedicated to helping organizations embrace modern management concepts. Together, we'll explore common pitfalls in training, innovative strategies to enhance virtual engagement, and how to create learner-centered design that empowers participants. So let's jump in if you don't mind. Hi, Jose.
Hello, hi. How are you, Ina? Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you here today. And my probably the listeners could hear by my voice that I'm a little bit sick, so I'm sorry if you're experiencing trouble understanding what I'm saying at this moment. I truly hope that this episode is going to be insightful. And without further ado, let's jump to rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Awesome. So what book or a resource can you recommend on L&D or educational topics?
So, I mean, there is lots of great materials out there, but because some of our conversations have been about my background with training from the back of a room, I think the obvious choice is like Training from the Back of a Room by Sharon Bowman. It's a fantastic book with very practical advice about how to design very engaging content. And the less known one from Sharon is one called what's it called? Using Brain Science to Make Training Stick, which is really, really good as well. So yeah, two books that have been hugely influential in my career as a trainer.
Lovely. Thank you for these recommendations. Who do you recommend following and inviting to this podcast from L&D or educational experts?
It's a interesting. This is a bit of a challenge because by naming one person, it would be hugely unfair. So I'll mention a few things that I follow and people or organizations that I follow. One of them is the going from training back of a room. We have a training from the back of a room blog that Sharon Bowman produces, and sometimes you get the community of trainers blogging there. So that's one, which is great. And then I also follow things like the learningscientist.org blog, fantastic advice on a regular basis. I quite fond of something called teaching walkthroughs. I always get the name wrong, so let me just quickly get the name because he's Oliver Cavigioli. I really like his content as well. And the last one is another how can I say contributor in the world of like training and very engaging design of instructional design will be the Tiagi group.
Mm-hmm. Could you share a memorable failure or a setback in your educational journey or your training journey, and how did you overcome it? Maybe some lessons drawn.
Sure. I mean, when I was thinking about this, I mean, this is a rapid question, so we kind of like know what that is coming. I always remember in terms of a failure is an event that I had a few years ago, where basically someone hired me to do a class, but that was not the class that people really wanted.
Mm-hmm. That happens
Fortunately,
to the best of us, I think.
it happens. But fortunately, one thing that I typically, using TBR, training from the back of a room, one of the things that we do at the beginning is a connections exercise. And this is not the typical energizer, which is just like, well, sometimes energizers are quite wasteful. This is like connecting the participants to the topic, to themselves, to what they already know. And asking that group what was the takeaways that they wanted to get from the class, it really immediately, I had an interesting feeling the moment I walked into the room and people started to arrive, but immediately showed me that there was a mismatch between what I was there to deliver and what these people were telling me they wanted to get from the class. So that was interesting. I then run something called the Prisoner's Game, where you, in a safe way, you assess how willing the people are in that room. And it came out that most people were there because someone had told them to be there. Um, so combining those two basically was a very, very strong opportunity to say, okay, look, what are we going to do to deliver something of value to you? Because delivering the class that I was there to deliver was not going to be the right thing. So I say, these days I say, I don't improvise, I contextualize. The context was telling me that I needed to adapt. And we delivered a class that was, it wasn't brilliant, obviously, because it was not improvising, but just getting things out of my toolkit. But it was satisfactory enough for that group. But it was that moment, like identifying that there was a problem really in the first 10 minutes of the class and then responding to that.
Sounds great, yes, and I think we will have a similar story to share, but always different endings because, well, yeah.
Yes.
Next one. What question must be asked on a job interview for L&D specialist?
I, I don't consider myself an LD specialist. I advise LD people and I help with trainer programs and assessing the effectiveness of the training courses. And then I deliver training, of course. But there is one thing that I would love to ask this question, which is how do you measure the effectiveness of a class 6 months after the class?
Why 6 months in particular?
It's long enough to see how things have stuck, and it's not too long enough that then they have forgotten the impact that the class had. So it's an arbitrary number. I mean, again, the context may also determine whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. I tend to go for 6 months, but it's the important thing is that as a trainer, the asking at the end of a class, how was the class, is actually almost pointless information, because frankly, as a trainer, I say a few jokes and I do something interesting towards the end of a class and I'm going to get excellent NPS scores. Yeah. So that's not really valuable. What really valuable is how did the class change how did it impact their career, their practice, their knowledge? And you can only measure that after a while. So my question in an interview will be, how do you actually measure this? Do you measure this? And then how do you do it? Otherwise, frankly, just if all we have is the data right at the end of a class, that data is you can manipulate it, and I don't think it's trustworthy many times.
Yes, I see. It's really interesting that nowadays we talk a lot about vanity metrics like NPS, and it's kind of easy to have a very satisfactory NPS level right after the training, but it's also same easy to have your employee wondering 6 months later, what, there was some training? I'm not sure. Was there really? So it totally makes sense, your perspective. And lastly,
If I add something quickly about that, because then if I know that my measure of success is 6 months after the training class, it's an incentive for me as well to say, don't forget about this class. Don't forget about these people. How is there a way of continuing? Is there a communication that you can establish? Is there a relationship you want to establish? Because I usually say that actually the class actually starts at the end of the class.
yeah.
We have looked at it. We have looked at some topic in an educational context. It's making it real in their job, what really matters, and that's where the class really starts. So for me, putting the measure 6 months afterwards is an incentive to say, okay, what can I do to ensure the success of the participants of my training?
Absolutely.
So, yes.
Yeah. Lastly, if you had to give just one piece of advice for someone who is starting their career in L&D, what would that be?
Really difficult. I'm not sure. I mean, I think the most interesting thing, again, I'm speaking as a trainer. I will say that maybe one of the biggest lessons that I did have to learn, or I learned over the years, was to park my ego when I go into a classroom. It's amazing feeling when you go into the room and you start talking and you feel like the most intelligent person in the room, and everybody's looking at you like, wow, all the adrenaline and whatever it is, all these different hormones makes you feel amazing as a trainer. But that's often we let our ego and that feeling dominate us. And the thing is like, just park your ego, and you are in the class for people to learn, not for you to look great. So and if you're in a learning and development environment, you're not training, but you are doing a learning and development environment, kind of like ensure that that's happening in the training classes that you are organizing, running, facilitating, whatever it is.
Yeah. Very honest and practical answer, because I think we've all felt that every once in a while.
Really difficult. I mean, it's really human to, you feel great about it, you want more of that. You become addicted to that feeling of like, wow, I'm awesome. But it's not us who have to be awesome, it's the participants who have to feel awesome.
Absolutely. That's what actually we will talk a lot about, the participant, right? So designing training with the learner in the center. However, let's start from something that I think is bothering most of us. There is no common statistics what's the percent of failed trainings. However, we can assume that since there is a lot of conversation, it's quite big. And by failed, we mean that 6 months later, just as we discussed, probably not many people will remember if they had done it or not. So in your experience, what are the most common reasons for training programs to fail?
Obviously, this is going to be context-based. There are some patterns that we see repeating, and I've seen myself working as a trainer, working with L&D departments in training programs. I think some of the things that might happen, or the causes for these things, might be sometimes we got just really generic programs, and we just almost like carpet bomb the organization with those programs. The example that I was recently in a learning and development conference, and one of the examples that we were giving was the standard like leadership program. That leadership program might be really good, really awesome, but in its entirety might not be what people need. People that attend those training programs might need specific elements of that, and the order might not be the standard sequential thing that we have. So in some ways, contextualizing, individualizing, it may be that someone really needs just a communication piece and nothing else. Why do we put them through the whole program? So in some ways, we're just like applying a cookie cutter approach, carpet bombing the organization rather than spending the time to understand the needs. And that's what we were talking about a lot about, like mapping. We have something called change mapping. It's like mapping what are the needs and then doing the right interventions at the point of need. So that's one. It's just not really contextualized enough. The other one is then when you get people in a classroom, and the classroom design may just not be as impactful as we wish. It can be very generic. It can be like driven by the trainer. What I was saying before, the trainer is the center of attention, rather than making something that is truly engaging and learning and experiential. So I think those two are probably enough. There's another one, which is how do you scale learning?
Mhm.
Especially if you're depending on external people like me, we tend to be expensive, to be honest. So it may be useful, expensive. Hopefully the impact that we generate is okay, but it's not sustainable. Um, we might be able to do something about creating an impact with a few tens or hundreds of people, but if you need to do the 10x exercises, okay, how do you go into thousands of tens of thousands of people? You cannot do it through an external person. So the other thing that we fail many times is to create that model where how do you create the mechanism for that learning to become internal? You get the first participants to become the future trainers or the future coaches. So there are three possible causes that I've seen, all of them interacting in reality in many organizations.
Then let's focus on something which is like the reverse, right?
Mhm.
Of the problematics that you've just elaborated on. Our episode is titled "Become a Jedi Trainer." So, who is a Jedi trainer then, in your point of view?
Um, I mean, hopefully the Jedi trainer is the trainer, but what is what is interesting and sometimes is like counterintuitive that the best training is one where we as the trainers will remove ourselves from the center of attention.
Mhm.
And we put the participants in the center of what we are doing. So we talk about learner-led environments.
Mhm.
I drew this as an infographic, and I said, like, normally through our careers as trainers, where we start is by basically, as our skills are still not particularly honed, we start with dominating the environment, and we are just talking all the time, and we're just using PowerPoint, and it's all about us. Yeah. So we are leaving very little space for the class to explore their questions, their needs. It's just all about the trainer. And actually, it's probably because the trainer is not confident enough or capable enough yet. Um, then we start talking about immersive training. But what you see normally with immersive training, or what people usually talk about what immersive training is that the trainer is still leading the environment. They're still the center of attention. They're still speaking most of the time. They might be using things like activities and things like that, but it's all about the trainer still. Yeah. Um, and that's good. And that's the majority of things that we do. And again, that's where my ego is really amazing. But we know one thing, that the person that does most of the speaking is the person that does most of the learning. So the trainer shouldn't be dominating the conversation. And that's where I think we enter that Jedi level. We said, okay, we delegate the learning we create the right environment, right scaffolding, we design the instructional space so that then we can delegate the learning to the participants. And they learn through activities, through conversations, through exploring. They teach each other. And as a trainer, all I have to do is to make sure that the learning is being observed, is happening, and maybe correct the things that are not entirely correct at the end. Yeah, but you can delegate a huge amount of the learning to the participants, and then use that kind of like evidence-based learning. And literally, that's what we talk about training from the back of a room. We step to the back and just give the space for people to feel it with their knowledge, their learning, their ability to think, their critical thinking, all those good things that really, especially in knowledge work, all those things are really, really important in the end.
Yeah. You find that this particular approach works best with, for instance, introducing to the new frameworks of work like Scrum and Agile, or some other as well?
We have used it with, yes, it does work with things like teaching people how to do the Scrum or Kanban or whatever. It's generally in the knowledge work space. Is generally whenever we're doing something which requires people's thinking. Basically, like don't ever leave your brain at the door. Yeah. So it has worked with us with like leadership development, with sort of like teaching people to do collaboration, workshop design as well. So basically, is this idea that we are? I usually say in my training that every training is unique, and in part is because we are co-creating what we're going to learn. I was last week delivering a training course for a company in Peru, so like thousands of kilometers away. But it was interesting that as the class started and we built the safety for this to emerge, then the questions started to really appear, and the questions were fabulous. And those questions were actually, while remaining on topic, were giving us the possibility to explore the concepts that we were dealing with, but explore the concepts in a way that was meaningful and impactful for the participants. So that kind of like process that was happening, it was happening inside people's minds. It was active learning, active participation, active questioning. And that's what makes learning stick as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it's this topic of trainer being insecure yet, right? And that's why putting himself in the front, right, on the first place and in the middle of everywhere. I think it's also part of the reason so why the questions are not allowed, or you can't let yourself to be
Yeah.
asked many questions because you might think that maybe I'm not gonna know answer to all of them. So maybe that's the reason.
Yeah. That's really true. In when we're delivering something that is new to us, doesn't mean that we are not good trainers, but maybe something that we're new to we haven't delivered many times, or maybe that we are new in the career, in our career.
Yeah.
But there is the opposite side of it, is that when we are um, far too confident about our knowledge, which I see as well. I mean, sometimes I feel the temptation as a trainer often. I mean, I'm an expert in, Kanban and Scrum and all sorts of things there in the agile space. And I sometimes feel that there is so many things that I want to share with people that it's really difficult to not try to share them. One thing that one of the key things that we keep in mind when we're doing TBR, for example, is to say only teach what needs to be taught, no more, if you can. Yeah, because it's so easy for me to start bombarding people with additional knowledge or additional information, whether it's needed or not. So I might end up not teaching to the learning outcomes.
Mhm.
This is one of my challenges all the time, that I try to do that. But there is trainers that absolutely believe in this. Absolutely believe in, I am here to impart wisdom. I am here to share how much I know to you,
Mhm.
and that can be that. Obviously, there's potential value in this, but that is easy to fall in what we call edutainment.
Yes.
I'm really clever. I'm gonna impact you with my knowledge, but I'm not learning. I'm just hearing it, but I might not be learning it.
Mhm.
Again, the person that does most of the learning is the person doing most of the talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
There has been a wonderful experiment conducted by, I'm not sure what, unfortunately, the name of the researcher was. However, he remembered that his most favorite lesson at school was math. And he remembers the lesson because the teacher used to bring cakes, and he would just explain some topics on cakes and just
Awesome. Yeah.
given some kind of information through showing some sweets and then having fun eating them. However, when he met the teacher and the teacher asked, "I'm so happy that you enjoyed my classes. Do you remember what was the topic that was taught through this lesson?"
Cakes.
And he couldn't remember that. So,
So, so that's a really interesting thing. I have stopped using things like Lego in my training
yeah.
because it happened often that when you ask people, okay, what did you enjoy about the class? What was most effective? They said Lego. But more interesting is that and that's not the problem. The problem was that when we are running the activities and you are observing what people are doing, you put something like Lego, and people stop focusing on what am I trying to learn. All they were trying to do was use Lego. So we have to be careful about how we design the activities, because yes, Lego is awesome, but if it gets on the way of learning, if people forget that there is a learning outcome and all they are doing is just putting bricks together, then that's a problem. Yeah, and it could be the instructional design. It could be something that then you do. Okay, how do you reflect? What have you learned? But
Mhm.
but during the activity, we saw many times that people were just like just lost track of what we were trying to do, and all they were doing is playing with the Lego. So I ended up not. I avoid using Lego if I can, or other things that do that.
Interesting. It's really interesting to see how different practices reflect different yet similar sometimes experiences. But coming back to the stepping aside, letting the
Mhm.
learner explore the topic themselves, I have a very logical question. When COVID hit,
Yes, when
how
COVID hit.
yeah,
When COVID hit, it was both, as probably for everybody else in the learning and development space, it was both a major crisis and a major opportunity. My company, we are a very small niche consultancy. We have always been distributed, so we have worked with distributed tools for many years. But client work was always in person, and no one will even consider remote learning, remote things. So what we knew at the time is that there were things that could potentially be enabled through remote learning that were not available to us because everything had to be in person. And in person is kind of like, when you think about it, is suboptimal. We tend to do professional training, business training. So you're optimizing for things like getting people together on the same room for a day or two, yeah, rather than the actual learning itself. There are constraints, like important ones, like companies, for example, cannot fly me 4 times to their location. They rather say fly 1 time and then deliver the class in 2 days rather than deliver it in 4 sessions. Um, but when the virtual world arrived, then suddenly say, okay, good. We one, we need to survive as a business, so we need to start doing virtual training. But what we realized was that we couldn't just take our 2-day training that we had in person and literally try to deliver it online. A lot of trainers did that. And you saw things like, we have very hands-on practice. For example, like things like tossing the ball exercises, or Lego, or whatever, or flipping a coin. And suddenly you saw people spending a lot of time trying to replicate the activity in a virtual way. And we were like, hold on a minute. No, this is wrong. What we need to do is go back about, we have this activity in order to deliver a learning outcome. So go back to the learning outcome and then think about, does the activity still work? Yes, awesome, just reuse it. Does it work? Maybe it doesn't work, but it's adaptable to the virtual content. Awesome, adapt it. But sometimes it's like, it just doesn't work. This is not transferable to the online environment. Like flipping the coin, the way it was done, you couldn't really transfer it. So we were, okay, let's design something new which is adapted to the virtual environment. So we spent a lot of time redesigning our training. We were all the way back to the learning outcomes. And then we started to rebuild the training. And in the process, things like, for example, the training from the back community, back of the room community, TBR, we even went back and said, okay, how do we adapt TBR for the virtual environment? So we came up with the virtual edition of TBR. So even we went back and said, okay, how do we actually deliver learning outcomes, and what works and what doesn't? So one thing that, for example, emerged was that we can still do things like introduce movement, but you can do movement in a different way. So we started to think about, how do we introduce movement in a virtual space. We had the opportunity to bring space repetition and space practice. So we advise people not to do more than 3 hours training, but also don't do it in consecutive days. So we put at least 1 or 2 days in between. And in those 1 or 2 days, people can do something on their own. That's space repetition, that's dual coding, that's all those good things that help to people to interiorize the learning. So I don't know if it's too long an answer, but there was a real challenge because we needed to survive as businesses, but it brought the opportunity to do things differently and still deliver very engaging training.
Yeah, I don't think that it's possible to have a too long answer on this question because it's so vast. And I think that now 2024 is the perfect time to truly reflect on everything what was done in a hurry during COVID times, right? Because I'm pretty sure that everyone has had some kind of mistakes or lessons learned. And with the coin example is wonderful. How many of us try to recreate something in virtual environment that worked really well in classroom. However, it didn't bring the original agenda, and the goals were just for entertainment, but to keep the your own order, right? Not the learner, but your own, how you used to do things. Are there any other strategies that you find work quite well once you transfer the classroom learning into the virtual?
So the hard to say. I mean, the thing for me when we're in the virtual environment is that obviously the main thing to remember, I don't know if it is a strategy per se, but basically the main thing to remember is that we can deliver something which is quite effective in that environment. Yeah. So a little bit to repeat again, it's just okay, go back to what are the learning outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Yeah. And then design something that is specifically adapted to the environment. I cry every time that I still see people doing 2-day classes, 8 hours online. It's like you're subjecting your participants to torture. There's no, you can tell me whatever, there's no way that those participants are going to be engaged or fresh at the end of 8 hours. Yeah. So think about how do you maintain, how do you delegate the training still? How do you do instructional design so that the participants are at the core? Um, and how then do things that they are engaged, fresh, active, and all those good things. Um, as I say, we did a lot of things that in the training from the TBR world, training from the back of the room, with that virtual edition, where we said, okay, these are things that we can introduce movement, we can introduce conversations, we can introduce all sorts of things that generate good interaction between the participants. Use frequent breakout rooms. One of the typical things that we do again is like frequent breakout rooms. Why? Because then you get the small groups, and in the small groups, it's more likely that people will participate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one thing that we actually do, it just came to my mind as well, is that by using then tools like your Miro, your mural, your whiteboarding, whatever it is, the whiteboarding, you can do something where when we're in person, you're having all these, I say, osmotic conversations happening. You hear what the room is talking about, and sometimes you sense that they are getting it or not getting it. And as a trainer, you can be a few meters away, but then you think, okay, I might need to go and ask a question. I might need to go and help them. Yeah. How do you do that in the virtual environment when you are not in the room, in the breakout room? If you're in the breakout room, you break the conversation. So one thing that we did was this idea of seeing people speak without being in the conversation. And how did we do that? Is to say, all right, use Miro, for example, for them to capture the conversations. And as you see what the groups are capturing are coming up, you start thinking like, yeah, they're getting it. So it becomes observable. Yeah, I don't have to go and interrupt them. It's too, in the virtual world, is too specific, too disruptive.
Yeah.
So this is the idea about hearing the conversations without actually hearing them, by seeing them happening in your whiteboard.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting thing that emerged for us as we were developing training, and then saying like, how can we make it observable?
There
Use
you
the
are.
whiteboard.
Yes, yes, that's absolutely the key to all this, the breakout rooms problems. And I know that many don't like using them too many times. However, that's a perfect solution. And you're absolutely right. Once I've had, I was a participant actually at some of the training. I don't even remember what, but once I was sharing my screen and I was presenting something, and there I hear the interruption of the host of the whole session trying to elaborate on something. But I think that ever since then, the whole trust and the rapport that we built in our mini group, it was different. So that's to your point, that you're gonna disrupt it a little bit.
And one thing about this, that by saying that as well, you reminded me. When we keep people in the main room, I call the plenary room. Yeah. The interesting thing as well, what emerges is the possibility. You know how in many trainings there is always one person that is either more knowledgeable, more enthusiastic, or they just like to talk. Yeah. I call them, and sometimes they're very unaware that they're doing this, but they're like basically hijacking the conversation. I will define them as the learning thief, because every time that the learning thief talks, it's stealing from other people their opportunity to learn it themselves.
Mhm.
And we as the trainers can be the learning thief. When someone asks the question, we are immediately, oh, I'll give you the answer. And sometimes like, no, wait. Count to 10. Someone else might know something, the answer. So what breakout rooms give us as well is the possibility to say in a large group, and for me, large group is like 10, 15 people. Yeah. In a large group, what you end up having is that only a few people speak and other people can keep quiet. If you want to engage this idea of how is it, like giving people more of a voice, and more opportunity to speak. That's what you do with breakout rooms. You put people in groups of 2, 3 people, and it's much more. You have much more permission to speak, but also you have much more of an incentive to speak, and it's safer. So that's the value of breakout rooms. Many times it gives people more opportunity to speak and contribute.
Absolutely. Yes. Well,
No
now,
learning thief.
yeah, now I might need to do some reflections. How many times was I the learning thief? But that's
Most
after
of.
Yes. So lastly, from your perspective, what's one critical question that we should be asking about the future of virtual learning, but we aren't? So coming back to becoming a Jedi trainer, what's coming for the future?
Um, I mean, obviously, just generally in training is like, how do we make sure that we keep delivering in instructional design that is impactful and meaningful and really, really puts the learner at the center, yeah, of the learning. And then how do you measure this impact 6 months later? I'm actually working with a university in Mexico at the moment where they have started to use TBR, and interestingly, they have started to use TBR with how can I put it? I don't know the actual term, but it's like people who have no, they don't have the means to go to university,
Mhm.
but they have some educational thing. So basically, it's disadvantaged segments of the educational system. Um, they started to do TBR, and they are already observing a meaningful impact in retention, in engagement. There is not so much churn. People are finishing the classes. So I'm really keen on seeing whether we get actually what kind of metrics do we get, because it's if what we are seeing happens, it's super powerful. Um, but in terms of the you know what, I probably forgot the question. Oh yes, I think what we need to do in terms of like what's the impact of learning is one thing that we need to be mindful of at the moment is that I think that we are saturated.
Mhm.
People are just quite tired with, well, I don't know if it's tired, but I think we are just being, there is something out there which is like it feels like there is a consumer behavior change and a consumer expectation change. And it feels that it's much more difficult to get people to sit in any sort of class right now, at least in my space. Um, there is less attention span. There is all these things like your self-paced courses, your whatever plural site Udemy's, all the appearance of AI. So I think as trainers, what we need, or, you know, people that deliver training, learning and development, we need to keep looking at saying, okay, how is this changing? But how is it changing from our technology, our skills, but also what is the consumer expectations and behavioral demand that they have? Because as I say, when I see still us in the training world with training dominated environments with 2-day training and stuff like that, that is just showing me an inability to adapt.
Yes.
So I think we need to keep finding what it's possible to deliver awesome experiences. It really is possible, but it requires the effort, the attention, the care, and the constant questioning about saying, okay, how am I doing things that actually impact my participants, and then measure it 6 months down the line, 3 months down the line. So I don't know if this is a little bit like convoluted, but I think that's something that's really important.
Can't agree more. I think that the demand for a quality has never been this big, and we truly need to reevaluate some of the very common methods of sharing knowledge that we are using, because some of them probably are quite outdated. Okay.
If I add another thing, in a context where we are probably doing this with fewer budgets, it's more difficult, fewer resources, as in like economic and things, and then people, so we have less capacity. It's actually even more important to be able to go to our businesses and say, look, you know, training and learning is not a cost. If we are in the knowledge space, learning is a key asset of our future. So how do we justify, how can we provide evidence to say like this is how we are making the future of the company?
Yes.
And unfortunately we can deliver more with less, less with more with less. Sorry, more with less. So we can deliver more impact with less budgets and things like that. But we've got to be quite intentional about how do we do this.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
possible.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So in the end of the day, we need to adapt to the new emerging world, because it's certainly going to change with AI and everything. And we can talk actually for another hour about that. But unfortunately, we have to sum up to say huge, huge accent hi to your cat, who was the
Yes.
first host of this podcast.
She's been up and down all the time. I can see.
Yeah, I think she might have actually brought us a few extra hundreds of views because let's be honest, she's much more adorable than any of the hosts could ever be. Because
She's the star, by the way, in my house. No.
yeah. So thank you for joining us for this episode of EdTalks. A big thank you to our guest, Jose Casal, for sharing his thoughts on virtual learning and business agility. We hope that you found this discussion enlightening and that you've inspired to rethink your training programs and embrace new strategies for success. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And until the next time, goodbye.
Goodbye, and thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.